Sarah, an architect whose world revolved around the precise lines of blueprints and the relentless march of deadlines, found solace in the meticulous order of her profession. Her life, a carefully constructed edifice of routines and expectations, was a testament to her unwavering control. Yet beneath this polished exterior, a deep-seated fear of imperfection gnawed at her, a silent, insidious force that dictated every decision, every interaction. She meticulously curated her surroundings, her thoughts, even her emotions, creating a fortress against the chaos she so desperately feared. This relentless pursuit of flawlessness, however, had come at a cost. A strained relationship with her estranged sister Emily cast a long and persistent shadow over Sarah's otherwise orderly existence. Years of unspoken resentments and perceived betrayals had carved an impassable chasm between them, leaving Sarah with a lingering sense of unresolved anguish. Flashbacks, unbidden and unwelcome, often pierced the veneer of her composure, revealing snippets of a shared childhood trauma. A hushed secret, a moment of betrayal that had splintered their bond irrevocably, haunted her subconscious. It was a wound that, despite the passage of time, refused to heal, festering beneath the surface of her carefully constructed life. Her chronic stress, a constant companion in her demanding career, began to manifest physically. Unexplained chest pains, sharp and fleeting, would seize her at unpredictable moments, stealing her breath. Dizzy spells, disorienting and alarming, would occasionally blur her vision, threatening to unmoor her from reality. Yet, with a characteristic dismissiveness, Sarah attributed these unsettling symptoms to overwork, to the relentless pressure of her profession, and to the pervasive anxiety that had become an almost intrinsic part of her being. She pushed them aside, refusing to acknowledge the insistent whispers of her own body, convinced that a few extra hours of sleep or a strong cup of coffee would somehow banish them. A critical presentation loomed on the horizon, a project that demanded her absolute focus, her unparalleled precision. It was the culmination of months of tireless effort, a potential turning point in her career, and she poured every ounce of her remaining energy into perfecting every detail. The stakes felt impossibly high, and the thought of any misstep sent a tremor of dread through her. The night before this pivotal presentation, however, her carefully maintained equilibrium shattered. A violent argument erupted with her husband, David, his voice laced with frustration, his eyes reflecting a weariness she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. The catalyst for their heated exchange was Emily's desperate plea for help, a cry from the depths of her own struggles that Sarah, in her rigid adherence to her self-imposed boundaries, had sternly rejected. David, witnessing Emily's vulnerability and his wife's unyielding stance, had pleaded with Sarah to reconsider, to offer her sister the compassion she so clearly needed. But Sarah, entrenched in her bitterness and her perceived righteousness, had remained unmoved. Her refusal, sharp and unequivocal, solidified her isolation, not just from Emily, but from David too, intensifying the internal turmoil that raged within her. The weight of her unwavering pride, her inability to forgive, pressed down on her, suffocating her with its intensity. The argument escalated, words exchanged like poisoned arrows, each one deepening the chasm between them. Suddenly, a searing pain, unlike anything she had ever experienced, erupted in her chest. The room began to spin, the vibrant colors of her carefully designed living space blurring into an indistinguishable swirl. A cold, clammy sweat broke out on her forehead, and her vision narrowed, tunnel-like. The world tilted precariously, and then, with a final, desperate gasp, Sarah collapsed. The meticulously constructed edifice of her life crumbled around her, the world spinning into a terrifying, all-encompassing darkness. The terrifying darkness that enveloped Sarah was not a descent into oblivion, but rather a chilling silence, abruptly punctuated by the frantic shouts of distant voices. The muffled urgency of medical personnel, their words indistinct yet heavy with impending doom, slowly permeated the edges of her conscious awareness. Then, a sound, piercing and unyielding, sliced through the chaotic din, a flatline. It was a single sustained tone devoid of rhythm or life, echoing the end of everything she had ever known, a stark declaration of finality. In a bizarre, almost ethereal shift, Sarah found herself observing the scene from above. Her perspective detached, she hovered, a silent spectator to her own demise. Below, a flurry of motion surrounded a body that was undeniably hers, yet felt utterly foreign, a discarded vessel. A profound, almost unsettling calm settled over her, replacing the panic that had seized her just moments before. It was a surreal, out-of-body experience, a disorienting yet strangely peaceful severance from the physical realm. She saw David, his face a mask of profound grief, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The raw anguish etched upon his features was a sight that, in her living state, would have torn her apart. But now, it registered with a curious, almost academic interest. Then she saw Emily, her sister, her face contorted with a tortured guilt that Sarah recognized instantly, a burden she had unknowingly placed upon her. The sight of Emily's suffering was a faint tremor in her newfound detachment, a distant echo of a pain she no longer felt. A cool, sterile light, unlike any she had encountered in life, began to envelop her. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but rather a soft, pervasive glow that gently pulled her away from the frantic scene below, away from the physical realm she had inhabited for so long. The sounds of the emergency room, the shouts, the beeps, the desperate pleas, became increasingly muffled, distant, like whispers from another world, fading into an indiscernible hum. The sensation of falling, then floating, took hold, a gentle descent into an endless, inky void. There was no up or down, no beginning or end, just an infinite expanse of profound blackness. Yet, within this boundless dark, there was no fear, only a strange sense of weightlessness and an almost hypnotic tranquility. As she drifted further, a faint, ethereal hum began to grow louder, permeating the silent void. It was not a sound in the conventional sense, but rather a vibration, a symphony of unseen forces resonating deep within her non-existent being. The hum intensified, a complex chorus of interwoven frequencies that seemed to speak directly to her essence, communicating without words, conveying a sense of immense power and ancient wisdom. A profound sense of loneliness enveloped her, a vast emptiness that stretched beyond comprehension. Yet paradoxically, within this loneliness, there was an undeniable presence, a pervasive awareness that surrounded her, a silent observer in the boundless expanse. It was not a hostile presence, nor was it overtly comforting, but simply there, an omnipresent consciousness that mirrored her own newfound ethereal state. The void, once terrifying, now felt like a cradle, holding her in its silent cosmic embrace. A blinding light, more intense than anything she had ever known, erupted from the heart of the ethereal hum, swallowing the infinite darkness in an instant. It was not a physical light, but an illumination of pure consciousness, revealing an otherworldly landscape that defied earthly perception. Towering structures, not of stone or metal, but crafted from pure shimmering energy, pierced the ethereal sky, their forms shifting and reforming with silent grace. Ancient and majestic beyond human comprehension. These were not buildings, but manifestations of thought, monuments to an existence far removed from the constraints of the material world. Within this radiant realm, entities of pure light, formless yet distinct, observed her with an ancient wisdom that seemed to encompass all time. They possessed no discernible features, no limbs or faces, yet their presence was undeniable, their awareness palpable. Their voices, not spoken aloud but a chorus of thoughts, resonated directly within her mind, a symphony of understanding that bypassed the need for audial perception. There was no judgment in their collective consciousness, only an unwavering clarity, a profound insight into the tapestry of existence. Then, without warning, she began to relive fragments of her life. These were not mere memories, faded and distant, but vivid, tangible experiences, replayed with startling clarity and an intensity that surpassed the original events. Each moment unfolded before her, not as an external observer, but as if she were living it again, feeling every emotion, every sensation, with an amplified awareness. Moments of profound kindness, where a gentle word or a helping hand had eased another's burden, shone with a quiet warmth. Conversely, moments of biting cruelty, of thoughtless words and selfish actions, burned with an intense, almost unbearable heat, their repercussions echoing through the ethereal space. The betrayal of Emily, a wound she had meticulously kept festering in her heart, replayed with an agonizing precision. She felt the sharp sting of anger, the bitter taste of unforgiveness, as if it were happening anew. But this time, she also perceived the underlying currents, the motivations and fears that had driven Emily's actions, a depth of understanding she had stubbornly refused to acknowledge in life. She witnessed the ripple effect of her choices, not just on herself, but on those around her. The pain she had inflicted, often unintentionally, became a tangible weight pressing down upon her non-existent form. The love she had withheld, the opportunities for connection and reconciliation she had scorned, manifested as gaping voids in her life's narrative, stark reminders of what could have been. A profound sense of regret, crushing in its intensity, washed over her. It was a regret not born of self-pity, but of a deep, aching comprehension of missed opportunities, of the unfulfilled potential for kindness and connection that had lain dormant within her. The weight of her past actions, the consequences of her pride and stubbornness, became an almost physical burden within this realm of pure thought. The entities, their luminous forms radiating an ancient truth, conveyed a message of profound interconnectedness. Their thoughts, clear and resonant within her mind, articulated the cosmic consequence of every action, every thought, every ripple sent out into the fabric of existence. There was no isolation, no solitary deed. Each choice was a thread woven into an intricate, vast tapestry, affecting not only the immediate participants, but the entire universal design. Her life, once viewed as a series of independent events, was now perceived as an integral part of this grand, interwoven whole, every decision resonating far beyond its immediate impact. The realization was both terrifying and liberating, a fundamental shift in her understanding of her own place in the cosmos. The blinding light, which had illuminated the vivid tapestry of her past, began to dim, slowly receding like a tide pulling back from the shore. As the brilliance softened, it revealed a landscape far more stark, yet equally profound, a crossroads. Before her, paths branched out into unknown destinies, each shimmering with a distinct, almost palpable energy. One path, shrouded in a comforting, pearlescent mist, beckoned with the promise of peace, of oblivion, a gentle dissolution into the cosmic ether where all burdens would be lifted. It was an alluring prospect, a sweet release from the agonizing clarity of her recent revelations. The other path, however, was a stark contrast. It appeared thorny and arduous, winding through jagged, shadowed terrain, a path that unmistakably led back to the raw, unvarnished pain of the living world, to the very existence she had just escaped. The entities, their luminous forms now less blinding, more defined against the receding light, presented her with a choice. Their collective thoughts resonated within her, not as a command but as a profound invitation. A chance, perhaps her last, to reconcile her past, to mend the fractured pieces of her earthly life. As if in answer to this unspoken question, visions flickered before her. She saw Emily, her sister, not as the figure of betrayal she had so rigidly clung to, but alone and utterly broken, burdened by the weight of their shared history, a history now illuminated by the entity's impartial light. Emily's face was etched with a sorrow so deep, so profound, that it pierced Sarah's ethereal form, a pang of empathy she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Then another vision materialized. David, her husband, consumed by a silent, suffocating sorrow. His life, without her presence, appeared as a muted, colorless existence, a stark testament to the void her absence had created. The carefully constructed edifice of her own life, so meticulously built, had crumbled, leaving behind a trail of desolation for those she had loved, or perhaps unknowingly pushed away. The weight of her unforgiveness, the bitter pride she had clutched so tightly, became unbearable in this realm of absolute truth. It felt like a physical anchor, dragging her down, preventing her from embracing the peace that the misty path offered. The entities had shown her the intricate web of consequences, the ripple effect of her choices, and now the full devastating impact of her emotional rigidity settled upon her. A desperate plea, nascent at first, then surging with an overwhelming force, began to form in her mind. It was a yearning for a second chance, not just for herself, but for the relationships she had allowed to wither, for the love she had suppressed. Then a pivotal revelation unfolded. The entities, with a gentle, knowing grace, unveiled a hidden truth about Emily's betrayal. It was not the simple act of self-interest Sarah had always believed, but a complex tapestry of desperation, fear, and a misguided attempt to protect Sarah from a perceived greater harm. A deeper context, a layer of understanding Sarah had willfully ignored, now lay bare. Emily's actions, while flawed, were born from a place of profound vulnerability, not malicious intent. This new perspective ignited a surge of empathy within Sarah's soul, a flicker of redemption that began to glow, faint yet persistent, against the backdrop of her profound regret. The rigid walls she had built around her heart, reinforced by years of resentment, began to crack. The entities had not judged her, but merely shown her the truth of her own making, allowing her to witness the intricate dance of cause and effect. And in that raw, unvarnished truth, a new path, one fraught with difficulty but rich with possibility, began to emerge, pulling her away from the allure of oblivion and towards the daunting prospect of return. The choice, once presented as a simple fork in the road, now felt like a profound spiritual awakening. A searing pain, unexpected and utterly visceral, ripped through her ethereal form. It was not the gentle warmth of the light, nor the cool embrace of the void, but a crude, raw jolt, like electricity surging through a fragile circuit. The comforting mist, which had promised peace and oblivion, receded abruptly, dissolving into nothingness. In its place, the chilling grip of reality asserted itself, a cold, unyielding pressure that sought to reclaim her. She fought against the pull, a desperate instinctual resistance against the inevitable. The lure of the peaceful void, with its promise of freedom from earthly burdens, was undeniably strong, a siren song whispering of eternal rest. Yet, the newly awakened empathy, the flicker of redemption that had ignited within her, burned brighter, demanding a different path. A desperate, silent scream echoed through the otherworldly realm, a cry that originated not from her throat, but from the very core of her being. "Don't send me back," she begged, her plea a torrent of unspoken words, a desperate protest against the encroaching return. Her voice, if it could be called such, was unheard in the cosmic expanse, yet her will was unwavering, a defiant spark against the cosmic tide. She had seen the truth, felt the weight of her choices, and now, armed with this newfound clarity, she yearned to rectify, to heal, to truly live. The entities, observing her struggle with a profound sadness that transcended human understanding, acknowledged her choice. Their luminous forms seemed to dim slightly, a silent testament to the gravity of her decision. They impressed upon her a final urgent message, not through words but through an overwhelming influx of images and sensations directly into her mind. It was a warning, stark and terrifying, interwoven with a prophecy of impending doom. She witnessed a vision of a shattered world, not just her own personal world, but the very fabric of existence unraveling, forests burning, oceans rising, humanity fragmented and lost, consumed by its own divisions and hubris. It was a future she now understood she must help prevent, a responsibility that settled upon her like a heavy, sacred mantle. The interconnectedness they had spoken of was not merely an abstract concept, it was a fragile web, and she was now inextricably woven into its fate. The light that had defined this otherworldly realm intensified, not with a gentle glow, but with a blinding, almost violent brilliance. It pulsed, throbbed, then began to collapse inward, a cosmic implosion that tore at her very essence. The sensation was overwhelming, a terrifying blend of disintegration and reformation. She felt herself being violently pulled back, against her will, towards life, towards the pain and promise of the physical world she had so recently departed. The journey was not serene. It was a tumultuous descent. a frantic kaleidoscope of colors and sounds, a dizzying rush through an unseen tunnel. The peace of the void was gone, replaced by a chaotic force dragging her relentlessly towards the reawakening of her earthly body. Every fiber of her being resisted, yet every fiber was also compelled. The entity's message resonated, a beacon in the storm, reminding her of the purpose that now awaited her. The choice had been made, and the universe in its infinite mysterious wisdom was honoring it, pushing her back to the precipice of existence, not as a punishment, but as a profound, terrifying gift. The darkness swallowed her whole, then burst into a blinding, searing light. Gasping for air, Sarah jolted awake, her lungs burning as if she had been underwater for an eternity. The sterile scent of the hospital, a stark contrast to the ethereal fragrances of the other realm, filled her senses, grounding her abruptly in a reality she had fought to escape. Her eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus on the fluorescent lights above, which seemed painfully bright after the cosmic darkness. A hand, warm and calloused, immediately gripped hers. David was there, his face etched with a profound mixture of exhaustion and relief, his eyes red-rimmed but shining with an undeniable hope. His whispered Sarah was a fragile sound, laden with weeks of unspoken fear and anguish. Just beyond David, standing hesitantly by the doorframe, was Emily. Her posture was timid, her shoulders hunched slightly, and her eyes, wide and filled with unshed tears, met Sarah's for a fleeting moment before dropping to the floor. The unspoken history between them hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that even Sarah's near-death experience couldn't entirely dispel. A flurry of doctors and nurses entered, their voices a low murmur as they checked monitors and made notes. They explained her inexplicable recovery, the 6 minutes she had been clinically dead, a medical anomaly they couldn't quite comprehend. "A miracle," one doctor murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. "A true miracle." Sarah listened, detached, as they recounted the events, the frantic attempts at resuscitation, the moment the flatline had finally given way to a faint, then steady rhythm. Each word felt like a distant echo, failing to capture the vastness of what she had experienced, the journey beyond the veil. She struggled to articulate her experience, the words proving woefully inadequate, the truth too vast and profound for human language. How could she explain the light entities, the cosmic consequences, the shattered world she had glimpsed? Her attempts felt clumsy, reductive, like trying to describe the ocean to someone who had only ever seen a puddle. They listened patiently, kindly, attributing her disjointed accounts to the trauma of her ordeal, the lingering effects of oxygen deprivation. But Sarah knew better. The world upon her return felt undeniably different. Colors seemed more vibrant, almost painfully intense, as if a filter had been removed from her perception. Sounds were more acute, every rustle of a sheet, every distant siren, a sharp intrusion into her sensitive awareness. It was as if her senses had been recalibrated, attuned to a frequency beyond the ordinary. She carried the immense weight of the entity's warning, the prophecy of impending doom, like a heavy, unseen burden on her shoulders. The vision of a shattered world was seared into her consciousness, a constant, unsettling reminder of the stakes. Her perspective on life, on love, on forgiveness, was irrevocably altered. The petty grievances that once consumed her now seemed trivial, meaningless. The rigid structures of her architectural world, once her sanctuary, felt confining, almost suffocating. The need to mend, to connect, to forgive, pulsed within her with an urgency she had never known. She reached out to Emily then, her hand trembling slightly as she extended it across the sterile bedsheets. It was a silent apology, a desperate need for connection that transcended years of bitterness and misunderstanding. Emily, startled, slowly met her gaze, her own hand hesitantly reaching out to meet Sarah's. A fragile bridge, built on the precipice of death and rebirth, began to form between them. The memory of the void, the blinding light, and the whispers of cosmic wisdom haunted her waking moments, a constant, vivid presence that refused to fade. It was a haunting, yes, but also a guiding force, propelling her forward into an uncertain future, armed with a truth few could ever comprehend. Sarah dedicated the subsequent years of her life to understanding and ultimately fulfilling the entity's prophecy. The architectural firm, once the meticulously crafted centerpiece of her existence, became a relic of a past self. She sold it, not with regret, but with a profound sense of liberation, embracing a simpler, more purposeful existence that allowed her the mental space to grapple with the overwhelming truths she now carried. The blueprints she once drafted for buildings now felt insignificant compared to the cosmic architecture she had glimpsed. Her relationship with Emily, once a brittle, strained thread, began to heal with a surprising tenderness. The shared vulnerability of Sarah's experience, coupled with the revelation of Emily's hidden truth, forged a new, unbreakable bond between them. They spent hours talking, not just about the past, but about the future, about the meaning of connection, and the profound responsibility Sarah felt. Emily, initially overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of Sarah's story, became her steadfast confidant, a silent guardian of the impossible truth. David, her pragmatic husband, had initially struggled with Sarah's account. His scientific mind searched for logical explanations, for physiological phenomena that could rationalize the inexplicable. But as he witnessed her profound transformation, the radiant calm that now emanated from her, the unwavering conviction in her eyes, his skepticism slowly eroded. He saw not a woman deluded by trauma, but one imbued with an extraordinary purpose. He began to believe, not in the literal interpretation of every detail, but in the undeniable shift within his wife, a shift that had brought her back from the brink and made her more wholly herself than ever before. He became her quiet support, an anchor in a world that often seemed to dismiss her message. Sarah began to share her story, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. She presented it not as a fantastical tale, but as a solemn truth, a stark warning delivered from beyond the veil. She spoke of interconnectedness, of the delicate balance of existence, and the urgent need for collective change. Her words, though often met with polite skepticism or outright dismissal, were infused with an earnestness that resonated deeply with a few curious souls. She lectured at small community centers, spoke to environmental groups, and even, on occasion, granted interviews to fringe podcasts, always carefully choosing her words, always striving to convey the gravity of her message without alienating her audience. Yet the world around her seemed largely oblivious, caught in its own trivial pursuits, its endless cycles of consumption and conflict. The impending darkness she had been warned about felt more imminent with each passing day, a slow, creeping shadow that only she seemed to perceive with such clarity. She carried the immense burden of knowing, of seeing the potential for humanity's self-destruction, a silent scream trapped within her soul. The apathy, the willful ignorance often left her feeling profoundly isolated, despite the love and support of Emily and David. Her eyes, once sharp and analytical, now held a wisdom beyond her years, a profound depth that reflected the cosmic vistas she had traversed. They held a silent plea for humanity to awaken, to recognize the precipice upon which it stood. She would often find herself gazing at the horizon, at the vast, indifferent sky, a solitary figure forever changed by her impossible journey. The prophecy lingered, a heavy, unfulfilled promise of either salvation or catastrophic ruin, a constant companion in her transformed existence. The ultimate outcome remained uncertain, a testament to the enduring mystery of free will and the fragile hope that humanity might yet choose a different path.